Senator Markey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. And in this issue of Zika, without question, because of the underfunded healthcare systems in these countries that are very near our border, just makes the case, once again, for full funding for the President's request so that we can put this preventative program in place in the countries that are going to be the conduit for Zika to come into our country. And I think that the sooner we actually begin to look at that $1.8 billion to $1.9 billion and just decide we're going to fund it, is the less likely we're going to have catastrophic consequences, because these are very weak healthcare systems in those three countries, but others like it, which also needs the kind of reinforcement which we gave to Liberia and other countries for the Ebola virus. And as a result, no one died in the United States. And if we take that same preventative attitude, I think we'd be in far better shape. But you don't question my premise that they're very weak healthcare systems in these countries, huh?
I think it varies depending upon the country, but clearly the countries that we're talking about today in Central America will require that type of assistance, yes.
Thank you. And on the human rights front, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2016 placed various conditions on aid for Central America, including withholding 50% of the funds until the Secretary of State certifies that they are taking effective steps to address 12 concerns, amongst them human rights. Last week it came to light that high echelons of the police department in Honduras were paid by drug cartels to order and carry out assassinations of anti-drug officials. Last month, Berta Caceres, a human rights and environmental activist from Honduras, was murdered by gunmen who entered her home in the middle of the night and shot her. This was 1 week after she received death threats because of her opposition to a hydroelectric project in Honduras. It may be a good project or not, but you shouldn't be killed for expressing your views. And I'm sorry to say that this type of violence is not restricted to Honduras. The most recent human rights report cites significant human rights problems in Honduras, but also Guatemala and El Salvador, countries which suffer from corruption, weak justice systems. And so my first question is, in an environment where officials conspire with criminals to commit murder, what are your perspectives on how difficult it will be for the Secretary to certify that the countries of Central America are taking effective measures with respect to the protection of human rights?
Senator, thank you for that question, and it is a very important issue. If I could just share a personal story. I served in El Salvador in our embassy from 2001 to 2005. I knew Julian Aristides Gonzalez Arias. I knew Alfredo Landaverde. They were great friends to the United States. They worked hard to fight drug trafficking in their country. And this revelation that they were killed by police officers is a very, very serious issue that is definitely going to
So will the Secretary, how will this complicate the ability of the Secretary, of you, to be able to certify that human rights violations are declining and not increasing?
Right. We are taking a very hard look at the certification requirements, and this is an area where the Honduran government is going to have to address improving civilian policing, addressing human rights violations, ending
So will
addressing the weak
will a partial cut in our aid to Honduras help the effort, in your opinion? Do we have sufficient flexibility in that area that is in reducing aid that will help them to respond?
I think first we have to make an assessment under the 12 different conditions that are going to withhold 50% of the aid, and once we make a fundamental decision about whether or not they meet those conditions, then we'll have to address the question.
Ms. Hogan, would a reduction in assistance help to focus the attention of the Honduran government and these other governments?
Actually, I would say that it's all the more reason that we need to support these governments to to provide a human rights protection mechanism that will allow for citizens and human rights defenders to be.
Right, but these are last week and last month. That is the the Honduran, environmentalist is assassinated. The other, the anti-drug officials are assassinated. So they're not listening.
One of the things that we're going to be able to do, given the increased resources that we have under the Central America strategy, is invest $25 million to help these governments in all three countries develop protection mechanisms for early warning systems, for rapid response, to support to victims, and to create regional networks of human rights defenders that can do peer-to-peer learning and benefit from each other's protection mechanisms that they have devised.
I want to move along this environmental front a little bit as well. Mexico 3 weeks ago had an auction for renewable electricity, and the winning bid came back for 1,700 megawatts of electricity at 4 cents a kilowatt hour, which is at the bottom of the price for electricity for the whole world. Now, again, you're going to have to be taking on those interests in Mexico, but in these Central American countries in order to have this capturing of solar energy. But I would urge you to accelerate any programs, a pace at which we have a Central American electricity program that matches off with Electrify Africa. Okay, this is a tremendous opportunity. And one final question, which is on MS-13, Mara Salvatruch, because these gangs, Salvadoran-based, are massive up in Massachusetts. Okay, so what are we doing to interdict this relationship as it comes through Mexico and then haunts the cities of the Northeast, but all across America?
The request includes funding for the FBI's anti-gang task force in all three countries. Working with the FBI and local authorities, we've begun to gather greater understanding and information about these gangs, and I think we have good programs that both prevent the gangs from recruiting new members and also are enabling U.S. law enforcement to have greater insight and information about gang activities as to how they relate to their work, their criminal activity in the United States.
Right, so these governments just have to know how important this issue is to us because it's killing thousands of people across the United States on a yearly basis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you so much.